Hey guys, welcome to another episode of SEO On-Air. I'm going to say one phrase today. In these tough times. How many times have you guys heard this phrase? I'm sure you would have done it at least thousands of times. And I have just one question. How many times have you heard people say, in these happy times, we are going to invest more? We are very happy. Not many people say that openly. It's always the negativity that spread more. Times are always tough for people who don't take action, and it's when people really stop complaining and take action they could actually see great success. In the marketing world, there is one medium where every year people write off one particular medium saying that it's going away, and this has been happening ever since 2003, and still that medium has somehow found a way to sustain itself. No prizes for guessing though. It is organic traffic and SEO. And today we are going to discuss more about how to effectively utilize SEO for better ROI during and post this COVID situation. And to discuss more about this topic, we have brought in a special guest today, Mr. Ewan Watt, the founder and CEO of ROI.com.au. Ewan, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Central.
Awesome. So, Ewan, please can you tell us more about your agency, about what you guys do to our audience?
Well, just reflecting on your introduction there, Central, when I started ROI SEO agency in Australia in 2006, quite a lot of my colleagues said that I was too late and that the SEO burst had already gone. So there's always people with that mindset, doesn't matter what the environment is, but we've been going for 14 years.
Right.
We started off as a pure SEO company when being able to justify ROI was so easy and so quick 14 years ago. These days, as digital has become a much bigger part of our lives and a much bigger investment, we specialize in helping small to medium business grow their sales with a very integrated marketing solution. A lot of our effort these days is around conversion, because conversion ultimately generally has the biggest impact on ROI.
Right. Awesome. So, with regards to the overall environment, business environment, even so, we understand that people are now investing more. They are spending slightly less on the paid front. Now, how effectively can they use this environment to invest on SEO?
I think it's very hard to generalize at the moment because as I sit here in Australia speaking to you, Sentior, I live in a part of Australia called Victoria, and Victoria has been, even though Australia has done such a great job with the pandemic and COVID-19, and it's been relatively untouched, Victoria has gone through quite an outburst of cases in the last 7 days. So in Victoria, in the last 7 days, the mindset of businesses and how you're being impacted is completely different to another part of Australia where it's pretty much business as usual. So I wanted to use that example because I think, looking at any situation where every country, every age group, every style of business has been impacted so differently, I think it's very important to make that distinction at the start. Certainly travel, hospitality, any event businesses have been decimated. So the strategies that I would be talking about for those sorts of businesses are completely different to those, for example, in e-commerce or in industries that haven't been impacted by the pandemic. But what is true, Sensual, is a few things. One is that all of us are spending more time online than ever before. The amount of search that is happening on Google is growing at a phenomenal rate, and the decisions that we're making online are far more. So on the basis of those three things, you would have to say that SEO is more important than ever as we start to think about how we can grow our businesses or grow ourselves out of this post-COVID-19 environment.
Awesome. So yes, and when it comes to SEO, it's not just a single strategy. There is going to be like each and every keyword, depending on the intent, the strategy keeps on changing, right? So now, what are some of the the best ways that the businesses can utilize this? because right now the way, like you exactly mentioned, the way that people are consuming content during this time, it's going very high. And how could businesses utilize this effectively?
Look, I think when you take a step back and you think that everyone's impacted differently, I think the time for any business to be very targeted, very focused on the locations and
Hmm.
the audience that they're trying to focus on is more important than ever. And I think an audience first mentality is very important. I think the other area in the way digital has evolved is a lot of businesses and people seem to think about content from themselves point of view as a publisher, as opposed to putting themselves in the customer's shoes. So I think first of all, it's being very focused on your target market, um, thinking about what the audience is and what the moments are, what the situation they're in, and then certainly I think we're all consuming video a lot more, and video is a very effective way of communicating to clients who might be exposed to a new situation for the first time or might need to be educated on how a service or product can help them in this interesting time. I think they're the changes in content that are getting the most cut through at the moment.
Awesome. Now, when we look at this perspective, now, like I mentioned before, even so, now that the paid campaigns, the investment on the paid campaigns are going down, and people are spending more time on this. Now, obviously, it's going to indirectly affect Google as well. So they will definitely come back stronger. They are already, the SERPs are changed to such an extent that that is quite difficult to find a difference between an ad and an organic listing. Now, one thing that people always complain when it comes to the organic growth is that the click-through rate globally is going down for the SEOs. Now, how is there something that you would recommend, for the SEOs to improve the click-through rate? Because this is becoming quite a bit of a challenge for SEOs.
Well, I think anyone who's had experience with running an AdWords campaign themselves
Mhm.
would know that by investing, thinking in how you can, modify your creative to get a better connection rate and a better click-through rate rewards you, straight away in terms of a lower cost per click and a better traffic. So the same principles apply for SEO. It's just generally that the professionals that are involved with SEO generally, aren't trained on, creative click-through rates, but certainly a very effective way of guaranteeing, and I don't use the word guaranteeing lightly, as you could imagine, Senthil, the word guarantee is a found world in SEO, but if you actually take a step back for a moment and you look at all of your organic data where you have high entrances and you're ranking in the top three, just by focusing on those particular pages and setting some benchmarks on your click-through rate and setting a program to improve the click-through rate, you can literally be seeing improvements in traffic to those pages on the basis of incremental improvements in your click-through rate. So not only are you being rewarded in terms of more traffic,
Mhm.
generally you're being rewarded in terms of better clicks as well, because people are responding to a better message as they scroll down the page.
Great. Those are great tips. Even so moving on, when we are looking at the current situation, right? I know I'm bringing this up once again, but we have seen some of the companies, they simply write a lot of content about COVID-19, and they just getting, yes, they are somehow they're seeing some traction as well. But this is not evergreen, right? Because right now, yes, COVID happened, but it has nothing to do with the software company, right? So the software companies also are now getting into the foray of talking about COVID and all the other things. Now this trend is keep on rising. Now, don't you think that the evergreen content is what will work for them in the long run, and don't simply focus on the COVID situation?
Oh, look, I think any content strategy that is producing information that can be relevant or in some way seen connected with your brand is a good
Mhm.
strategy. However, I suppose the risk is that you can find yourself investing in areas and building databases which aren't going to have long-term value. So I think the balance is making sure that whatever content you're producing related to COVID is reflective of your target market, is reflective of the situations of the audience, is ultimately tied back to your brand proposition and what value you're trying to create. And as long as that becomes clear, and that is clear all the way through, I think it can be an effective strategy. Those strategies that start to move away from that just purely on traffic and database, I don't think they've got sustainability.
Okay, great. Now you did mention that you've been helping a lot of SMBs and trying to grow traffic for them, trying to grow some of the opportunities for them. Now, can you help us with explaining some of the most important things that SMB should be focusing on to help them get a better results through SEO?
Well, look, you might be surprised, Senthil, but 13 of our top 15 clients had record sales in the
Wow.
last 2 months.
Okay.
13 of the 15. The other two are bouncing back strong with pivot strategies, but have been impacted. So, for those businesses, and I don't want to paint a picture that we've got some magic bullet, but what I have seen in our agency is that there is businesses, that are in e-commerce or are in markets which need the types of, or delivering the types of products and services that are relevant today, such as office furniture, working from home, flexible office environments, these types of things. So it makes perfect sense for those businesses to accelerate. Whereas, of course, there is clients within our portfolio where they have stopped our services because they're just in sectors where people aren't buying. But so I think it's important to make that distinction. So for those businesses that are in e-commerce, for example, what we've seen work very well is very good database segmentation around profiles of clients to increase their repeat order value in a short period of time, and also segment client bases around larger businesses that may have longer lifetime value. So we've certainly seen breaking up the audience and the segmentation of our e-commerce clients that way. Also, locations that are certainly not as affected by the pandemic, and putting most of our marketing budget in those areas. We've found that very effective, and we've also capitalized on moments where some of the traditional retailers have been shut, and therefore those customers that would normally go into the store have decided to buy with our clients for the first time. I will put a caveat on that because I know that the industry is always full of these big stories of 500% growth, but the strategic advantage our e-commerce companies had is they did have existing databases, they did have existing business, they weren't starting from scratch, so they were certainly able to use that momentum to accelerate the last 3 months. The other strategies that have worked really well is going beyond what we found very ineffective is selling product. Just selling product and discounting, generally not effective. What we've found very effective is not only segmenting the market, but really communicating our message in the context of the benefit and the situations where our clients are helping. So if we take an example of a business that may be selling sort of trailers or for certain markets, investing in how certain other businesses that might be impacting the industry, how they're using those trailers to either drive down operational costs or achieve more revenue, etc. We're really going that extra effort of explaining all the way through what the benefit is, as opposed to just marketing a product and letting the customer join the dots. We're really finding that if we keep on joining the dots in the audience, in the story, and how they will benefit, by doing that, we're able to get a very good increase in sales for a large number of our clients.
Awesome.
The last tip I would give is probably one of the best growth hacks that we've been doing the last 2 weeks is we've really been optimizing the ROI of the remarketing list days. based on audience. So we've really been playing with that algorithm in terms of, what is our ROI and cost per sale for 1 day, for 3 days, for 7 days, for 14 days. We've really been playing with that as a leverage factor, and we've found that very effective towards the end of the financial year.
Awesome. In fact, as the name of your agency suggests, it's roi.com.au. So you're talking about the return of investment, the sales that's happening, which is great to know. So even
What's
so,
funny is when you run a business called ROI, could you imagine how many clients say to me, "Yeah, well, Ewan, the only reason I'm sitting here is because I want you to show me the ROI." So when you've got a name like this, naturally, that's what you've got to talk about.
absolutely. So you started this since 2003, right? The agency has been around.
2006, 14 years.
Right.
Yeah, been in the internet space for a long time. I started an SEO product for another company probably 4 or 5 years before that. But yeah, been in the internet space for 20, 25 years.
Wow, that's a lot of experience. You would have seen a lot of in fact, the whole growth of the SEO from keyword stuffing that was quite popular during the 2002 and 2003 to the to the guest posting and the blog commenting spam in the 2011 and 12, and you would have seen everything then.
Yeah,
The SEO
probably one
industry.
of the most interesting stories I could share with your audience was one of my earlier roles was working for a domain name company in Australia, and as we had the market share, we were the first company to understand the value of residual traffic when it came to expired domains.
Right.
And I never forget a story going back early 2000. There was a domain name called watertanks.com.au, which was obviously a very good name.
Mm-hmm.
And I was speaking to a business saying, well, at the time, I didn't realize how special it was. Not only could you get that name, but this website is still delegated and it's currently ranking number 3 in Google.
Wow.
And ironically, Sethiel, the person still decided not to buy it because they thought they didn't need another domain name. So there you go. In terms of the early days of the internet, what we consider to be gold these days, back 20 years ago, was considered worthless.
Right. I could just imagine what the company, what domain name they bought later, and then what ranking they are now for that same water tanks.
Yes, I think they're probably paying Google about $12 a click,
Oh,
and probably looking at a check for maybe $25,000 a year to rent that space.
okay. What a embarrassing miss. Okay. So now you did touch upon the situation where you mentioned that the hospitality industry, the travel industry, they're all taken ahead. Now the digital marketers working in such companies, it'll be really hard for them, right, to convince their bosses to invest on something, because SEO takes time. SEO is something where not necessarily we can show an ROI immediately.
Yeah,
So what are some of.
is that true? Do you think so? I mean, I'm going to challenge you on that.
Mhm.
I don't think that's the case.
Mhm.
I think there's actually a dichotomy. I think there's a whole range of things
Mhm.
that you can do, which absolutely you can be responsible for tangible outcomes. And then
Right.
there's also a whole range of things that you will take time. But
Mhm.
I think it's incorrect to say
Mhm.
that SEO takes time. We've just talked about things you can do, such as click-through rate. You can do better linking. You can update your content. You can update your meta tiles. You can do so many different things that can have an impact on
Mhm.
the SEO performance within a 24-hour period.
Right.
So I think there is items that you can do which are tactical, but you need to tell a client that this is what we're doing, and it is very tactical. And the KPIs and responsibilities and the outcomes you expect from that, are
Right.
very different. Of course, if you start to think about getting rankings and content for much bigger things, that is not realistic in a short period of time. But I think going back to your question,
Mhm.
which is more for travel industries, etc. I think
Yep.
if there's a view around, it is going to take a longer period of time for the industry to come back.
Yep.
There's two ways to look at it. One, is you can look at this and say this is really frustrating and that things should be happening better, but you can't control that. So if you
Yep.
just accept the fact that it is going to take longer, there's going to be a lot of unknowns. It is actually a perfect opportunity to be far more strategic about how you can approach your strategy from a 6-month to 12-month point of view, rather than being on that operational pressure. And
Right.
I think the travel industry is, Google and the results and the information we get from all the Google properties
Hmm.
is so important to travel and how we find locations. But I think if we reflect about when we go to a location that we haven't been to before, Central, it's not that easy to get the information you need without visiting
Right.
many, many websites. So would you agree?
No, absolutely. I'm with you on that. In fact, that is one of the consequences. Like you have to really look at the long-term strategy.
So yeah, my advice would be that to think long term, to once again think about the audience, think about the types of audience that are going to be visiting, your location or your country in 6 to 12 months' time. Really make an investment beyond your product to really put yourself in the customer's shoes, such as all the
Right.
things they may want to do in terms of their age, their gender, their interests. All the things they would do beyond just, going to a hotel or, going to, hiring a car and all those functional things we do. Really try and get an understanding of all the amazing things someone could do, wrap all that together for the customer, and
Mhm.
then use the time to do some very strategic partnering with other businesses that are trying to reach the same audience, but
Mhm.
you generally haven't had the amount of time that you'd like to forge these relationships with businesses that may provide value-added services. They may be in similar areas. There's a story of a client of ours in the last 3 months who runs a tour bus company. Unfortunately, they've had to shut down. But
Right.
what's interesting is that there is parts of Australia, because we're not accepting international tourists, but there's parts of Australia which are accepting tourists, and there's going to be a lot more people travelling within Australia. So the opportunity is that for that particular business is, rather than people coming to Melbourne and maybe doing a tour for 1 or 2 days,
Right.
they're now developing products which are 7 to 9 day tours that are combining many parts of Australia that they wouldn't have considered before. So there's an example of a business that's thinking longer term, thinking this is going to be something for 2 years, and then they're now creating new products
Right.
that can service the needs of people that have got a varying need in the next couple of years.
Awesome. That's good to know, Ewan. Now, Ewan, let's look at a couple of situations here. Now, let's take it's quite interesting since you mentioned that SEO. It's not necessarily that it's like it takes a lot of time, right? So it's now the actual thing was it's difficult to convince people that it is definitely doable in a short period of time. So can you help our audience really understand, like, let's take a couple of situations here. One is a well-established company, a domain which is already there for like 15 years. That company, but so far they've been only focusing on the paid traffic. Now, as a digital marketer, what are the things that they can mention to their boss to convince them to invest on SEO? What are the KPIs which you think can be put forth to their boss and get that confirmation to invest on SEO?
So just to clarify, we're talking, Sentinel, about a larger business. So I'm going to imagine that
Yeah.
there's probably a senior marketing executive is going to their divisional head to try and get budget
Yep.
to invest.
Yes.
So I think the first item that's going to be on the table is that a business case as to what we can expect in 6 to 12 months' time. So
Right.
with a business case, there's a number of ways you can look at. The first way you should look at it is in the context of what you're spending on AdWords or paid traffic, which is rented traffic. So that's actually not providing your brand any strategic advantage. So if you look at how much you're paying for that, like from the last annual budget, let's say for 12 months you were spending $100,000 and your cost per click was $3.
Mm-hmm.
When you're starting to look at the business case, you say, well, if I spent $25,000 or $50,000 of that paid budget on SEO, what is my break-even point to make up that paid year one? And I think that rather than sort of getting in terms of this sort of these quite hairy hypotheses about what could be in rankings and the size of the traffic and all these things, I would be having a different conversation and talking about a break-even analysis and saying, well, we're going to spend $50,000 on SEO, or we'll call it $60,000. It would normally cost us $3 a click. Well, let's set ourselves a minimum KPI of getting an additional 20,000 visits, and then we're in front year one. Now, if you start to talk that language, all of a sudden, that's only working out to around 1,500 to 1,800 extra clicks a month, and if you're a large website, being able to achieve that's not very difficult. All of a sudden, this idea of controls, etc., it becomes a very easy business case. And then I think you'll find your manager in the company is a lot more open to invest in this because they can see the long-term potential of SEO. And the only last question that they would ask is they would say, well, what are the guarantees or what are the assurances that my rankings aren't going to slip or go away? Well, I think, for most businesses, if you invest in a robust sitemap, and you've always, when you're updating your website, you've always got a very robust migration plan in place. The chances of you losing your rankings, other than competition, are quite limited. So therefore, you should be working on a scenario where not only you can bank those 20,000 extra visits, but you can be looking at something where you can be getting, well over and above that. And what that will mean, Senthil, to the marketing manager is they will get a nice pay rise. So with that money that they spent on pay, they've now got double the traffic, and out of that 50,000 they saved, they can provide extra 20,000 to the marketing manager, and the business has made 30, and that's what I call ROI and three-way benefit. What do you think?
No wonder the name of the agency, you have chosen it the right way. Even you exactly talk about that it's not just about convincing the boss, it's also about getting that nice little paycheck. And also one important point that you mentioned in your answer was that I mean, it's a big topic altogether, where people still believe that if you stop doing SEO, your rankings drop down. It's not the case, right? If you're really doing it right, not using any spammy tactics, then obviously it can sustain rankings, right?
Look, the only exceptions I see to that time and time again is poorly executed site migration plans. Other than that, I would 100% agree with you that in most cases, as long as you continue to keep an up-to-date website, generally there's not that many businesses that move into spaces unless you're probably in an e-commerce or a major publishers area. Where you may get pushed on the first, but for most businesses in most categories, I would 100% agree. I think those results are sustainable and bankable.
Absolutely. Awesome, Ewan. Now we just discussed
when you consider that even today, we've both been in the industry a long time, 15 to 20% of searches have never been done before, every month on Google, every day on Google. So if you've got a page that, when you think about that, there's always 15 to 20% of new searches and new types of expressions that people are using, you would think that you would almost be guaranteed of getting an incremental improvement as more people use Google and more people, as long as you keep on updating your website with fresh language, you should be getting found by more and more combinations of keywords statistically every month.
Awesome. Great, Ewan. So now we've just covered about the first situation. I did mention you that there is a second situation, but this is altogether a different set. This is like a small business having a very, very medium budget, And yes, obviously they don't have to run paid ads. Now with this limited, there is very, very less room for error. Now in this sort of situation, where do you put your money on within the SEO, whether it'll be like building more content, or is it like improving the backlink profile, or like how would the digital marketer now change the game and ensure that whatever strategy that he implies, it's like foolproof, at least for the next 1 year?
Well, I think there was two different questions there. The first question was given it's a small business, which
Yeah.
was one, where you get most bang for your buck,
Right.
and the second one, which would be sustainable. So I think they're
Yep.
quite different questions. So
Right.
I'll tackle the first one because I'm proud to say that a number of my clients that came to us, 10, 15 years ago and were spending $200 a month. Are
Mhm.
now spending, over $10,000 a month with our agency. So,
Wow.
we really, and the only reason they're doing that is they're making substantially more the other side. So, I treat every client as though it's my money, it's my investment. How do we get a return? Doesn't matter if it's $1, $5. How can we spend as little as possible and get the maximum return? So, I think
Right.
the first opportunity is if you're a business where you are local and suburbs or
Mhm.
location is important to you, there is no doubt that Google Maps and local SEO in terms of zoning in on particular postcodes is incredibly quick way to be able to get a return. Now that's not considered traditional SEO. I'm not quite sure why it is because, well, maybe it's a different process, but it is ultimately a part of Google. But the traffic that you can get from Google My Business through, good, targeting of certain suburbs, and being clear about the suburbs you service. Don't be, too greedy and try and be too broad in terms of the areas that you're targeting. By really zoning in on those particular areas, I would certainly be focusing on Google My Business optimization, local citations in terms of those listings that have traffic in those particular areas, and also SEOing your pages specifically for those suburbs. So that's for a business like that. If I was
Right.
a business that was perhaps smaller and had a niche product, I would only focus on one or two particular products,
Mhm.
and I would zone in on keywords where basically there was no one on the page which had relevant content, and I would try to get results within a very short period of time.
Right.
But what I would do is I would make sure that when someone gets to that page, they convert, because I cannot understand, Central, why so much money is spent on SEO and
Mhm.
conversion is an afterthought. What
Yeah.
is the point of getting people to a page if they don't do what you want them to do? I cannot understand why conversion optimization is
Mhm.
considered as something separate to
Mhm.
SEO. And perhaps that's why everyone has this problem trying to justify ROI, is because I look
Right.
at those as different things. Where if you actually say, if you're going to measure SEO based on, well, you want to get people to the traffic, but make sure when they get to that page, they either go to another page where they convert, or they pick up the phone and convert on that page. And that's the
Mm.
first thing that I would invest in, because there's no point getting people to a page if they don't do what you want them to do.
Awesome, you, and these are spectacular insights. This is something which people, they definitely miss out. They fully focus on, yeah, I'm gonna write content, I'm gonna do a bunch of links and all the things. But like you rightly pointed out, the conversion optimization is the key, because like we mentioned, there is limited budget in this situation. You can't go wrong. And even if you're getting even 100 or 200 traffic to your site, at least 2%, 3%, conversions, right? What is the conversion rate that you usually, for a hospitality industry, even from
Well,
organic traffic?
well, I think that's the wrong question. I think, at the end of the day, conversion rate is a sale,
Mm.
right? It's not a someone sending an email. It's someone
Yeah.
paying you money, right?
Yeah.
That's a real conversion. So it's
Right.
important we highlight that, because
Mhm.
if we're talking about hospitality and how many people go to Google My Business and how many people click on phone call and how many people click on photos,
Right.
well, how many of those become a customer? Who knows, right?
Right.
But ultimately we don't get lost in that detail. The average conversion rate of most websites is 3%, which is terrible. and,
Mhm.
and really is just a reflection of too many people not being focused on their audience.
Right.
So getting to your point of conversion for hospitality, for restaurants, most people who know the brand, etc., you're probably looking at somewhere between a 10 to 15% conversion. In
Mm-hmm.
accommodation, depending on the strength of the brand, you're probably somewhere between 6 and 8%. For
Right.
e-commerce, you're sitting between 1 and 2%, depending on the strength of your brand and how many
Right.
existing customers you have versus new customers. And for the average small business, you know what, if you really work, what you don't have as an advantage, you don't have a brand,
Mm-hmm.
you probably don't have the razzmatazz of the marketing of all the big guys that they can do. But what you do have is you have the ability to be faster and more nimble and personalized to people in that area. And as a result, you should be focusing on localizing your offering, why you're more personalized, why you can give them the better service, why you've got better response times. These are all things that you can do because you're not part of a bigger organization, and you should be aiming for things such as 8 to 15%
Right.
conversion rate on your page,
Mm-hmm.
because you're the only one who can respond to the needs to that customer.
Right.
And a lot of customers these days want things fast and they want things now, and that's what
Yeah.
small business have to be focused on. But if you're trying to be too many things to too many people as a small business, which too many small businesses make that mistake, they think that there's more safety in chasing more people. Whereas actually the opposite is true. There's more risk in chasing more people. There's less risk if you focus on one suburb.
Absolutely, Ewan. In fact, the reason I brought this up is because people believe that you need to have thousands of traffic to look at that. But like you mentioned, having a conversion, let's assume that 8% is the conversion rate. So even with 100 or 200 visitors, still you have an opportunity to get 15, 16 conversions out of it. So
Well,
it's
that's right.
not like.
That's a great example. It's a customer a day,
Mhm.
versus the task of getting the same result of a 1 or 2% conversion. And the hidden cost essential of that is not only if you're getting 2,000 people or 1,000 people to your website and a 1% conversion rate, which is
Right.
10 customers. What you don't see is what is the cost of your team or yourself chasing up all the wrong leads. What
Right.
is your cost of dealing with unprofitable customers? These are
Mhm.
all massive costs to your business, where if you focus on, as you said quite rightly, 8 to 10% with 100 people, you're getting the same number of customers and they're more profitable, and it happens to be 90% easier to achieve than trying to chase that goal of 1,000 visitors.
Absolutely. Well, that was a great conversation. Even there's a lot of things we learned from you. We quite clearly understood like where exactly you're coming from in terms of the whole approach to digital. You got the name right in your agency. You are also speaking about the same messaging about ROI. You have tons of things. In fact, this podcast is very limited. Maybe we should plan one more part to this because there is like loads of things that is coming from your side with regards to the conversions and stuff. So people who are listening to the show, if you guys have any questions further in terms of how to improve your conversions and how to get the right SEO strategy in place, we'll be linking out to Ewan's LinkedIn profile and also to his agency. So feel free to reach out to him for any questions. Ewan, it was a pleasure hosting you in our show. You answered all the questions patiently. Thank you so much for taking your time out.
Well, an absolute pleasure, Senthil. Great to be part of your show, and look forward to connecting again in the future. And good health to all your listeners and your family.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, guys, feel free to send your comments, add your comments in the blog post, and feel free to send your suggestions to us to improve this podcast. We are trying hard to bring in the people. So, as you can see, if you have listened this whole show, you would have known how much of value that we are bringing to the table. So, Ewan has actually shared a lot of insights, a lot of things, a lot of some, he's probably some of the myths, like he quite rightly said, it's not like SEO takes a lot of time. There are few things which you can do today, right now, so that small tweaks can actually help you get some results in the long run. So feel free to share your comments, listen to the show fully, and feel free to contact even if you have any questions as well.